Hey guys, I'm Tina Marie J. Welcome to our Tell 'em podcast today. I have Tia, and she's an ex-ICOC member. Super excited to hear her experience. Welcome, Tia.
Thank you.
So, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well today. Actually, just left Starbucks and I kind of booked it out of there. I was with my fiance and I saw a guy sit down. He looked kind of weird and didn't realize what he had in his hands. And two other guys came in to meet him, and I saw that the guys that came in also had Bibles. And then I looked and I'm like, oh God, they're about to have a study. So like I looked at my fiance, I was like, we gotta go. I'm triggered. So yeah.
Oh, yeah. Those lovely triggers, we all get them. So, how long were you a member for in the ICOC?
A little over 5 years.
Oh, okay, a little over 5 years. And how did you join? Did you get invited by a friend or family, or someone just stopped you in the street?
Yeah, actually, I had just moved to a new city, and one of my good friends from college also lived in this city. And during college, we would always talk about like basically getting our spiritual lives together because we were pretty promiscuous in college, I must say. So it was always our thing, like, yeah, after we graduate, we're gonna get it together. And so anyway, I ran into her and I just asked her what she was up to. And we met up a few times. And the last time that we met up that summer, as I was like getting settled in, she told me that what church she was going to and that she was studying the Bible and so on and so forth. And so I was like, I want to come visit. And so I actually invited myself. And then I got introduced to some people, got invited out to a couple of events. And I ended up studying because I didn't know studying was a thing. At that time in my life, I was really just trying to seek God. I was like, going through a lot of depression and all of that. And so I was seeking God on my own, and I just wanted to hang out with some girls. And I reached out to a couple of the girls that I had met, and just to like, so we could kind of sit around and kind of have just a talk and talk about, God and all of that. And little did I know that I was entering into what was known as the studies, and they started studying the Bible with me that same day. When we first started, I started with like the word study. Well, first of all, like I said, we met up, and so I thought we were just hanging out, having brunch or whatever, because it was like a Saturday morning, yada yada. So I thought, just let me chill. And then all of a sudden, these two girls come in and they're like asking me questions. And they were like, she was like, oh, I hope you don't mind. I brought somebody along with me. And I'm like, okay, nice to meet you too. And at first, I was like, okay, this is interesting. But then when I realized that they were asking me all of the questions, I was kind of put off a little bit because I'm like, kind of felt like, even though I had initiated everything, like I knew my intentions, and clearly there was some kind of miscommunication, but I kind of felt bulldozed in a way because I was like, dang, I didn't know that all eyes were going to be on me. Like I didn't know, I thought that I was going to be leading a conversation about the Bible. I had no clue that I was going to be more or less coached or interrogated, about the Bible or my knowledge of the Bible or whatever the case. So, I was put off by it, but I was interested in what they were saying because, again, I knew where I was emotionally. I was hungry. And I was like really seeking some sort of, I don't know the word, but I was seeking something, and I felt like that something had to come from God. So I was like, well, I'm just going to trust this process. But I am involved in like a Greek letter sorority. And as the studies went on, I felt like I was going through a pledging process all over again. Like I felt like I was being broken down and built back up. And it's funny because like my friend who introduced me to, who I had invited myself to church with and stuff, she and I are sorority sisters. And so when we were talking, she and I kind of got separated while she was in her studies and stuff like that. And they did that on purpose. And I realized that after the fact. But they didn't want us to, I guess, mislead each other. That was the words used. And but I mean, like, I would see her and she's always really done up and everything. But the fact that she like sometimes looked like who done it and why, I'd be like, what's going on with you? And I remember one time we met up and she was like, girl, I feel like I'm going through a process. And I'm like, I do too. But, we were just like, okay, we just got to trust this process. Like, maybe that's what it's all about. So, yeah. We were just
What process did you feel like you were going through? Like, can you explain?
Yeah, like when I was in a Greek letter organization, like it was like a mental process, right? So, you were challenged on what you already knew, and any misconceptions that you had, they were, broken down, and you were told not to think those anymore and rebuilt to think in a certain way. Well, transfer that over to the ICOC and the Bible studies, it felt very much like the same way. It's like, well, you were taught this growing up, but because that's wrong, or because it's the wrong denomination, or because it's just not right, or it's not the way, then like those things were thrown out the window, and I pretty much had to, I guess, rebuild or reconstruct my knowledge of the Bible and of Jesus and of Christianity based off of the scriptures that they were leading me to. And so it just felt like a mental process because honestly, like, I mean, I don't know how to explain it, but it was just like I was just constantly being told how wrong my way of thinking was and how worldly it was, and that I needed to change because it was filled with sin and just misleading, and just I had a misinterpretation of who God was and how my relationship with him should work. And so I was just beat down to the point where I remember being asked, hey, do you really think that you're a Christian? Because I was like talking, and I was like, and I made a comment, and I was like, yeah, us Christians. And I remember very specifically where we were. There were 3 girls sitting with me who were studying with me, and they looked at me and they're like, so Tia, do you really think that you're a Christian? And I'm like, well, yeah, because I think, I have this belief, I have that belief, I have that belief. And, I'm constantly trying to, better my life. And I mean, I was ripped to shreds with words, but I was ripped to shreds and was told, you are not a Christian. What have we taught you? What did we tell you what a Christian was? And I mean, they told me that my character was prideful. I hate that word.
I hate that word so much.
But they told me that my character was very prideful because I already felt like I was a Christian, but I was not where I needed to be able to consider myself to be one, and that I was going against the scriptures and what they had taught me by thinking that I already was a Christian and not actually being one. So it was a mental process in that, I went through my whole life having been raised in a church. I was baptized in a Baptist church at a young age of like 8 years old. And, although that's young, I felt like I knew what I was doing when I did it. I just felt like I fell off like most people do because we all fall short. But according to them, I was too young to even realize what I was doing. And so therefore my baptism didn't count, or it didn't take. And so I needed to redo everything I can't even say redo, because I remember when I said, well, I have to do this all over again, and they were like, you're not redoing anything because you haven't done it in the first place. Like, it was that type of tone of you're not who you think you are, so let's just stop right here and let's get started. Like, that type of mentality.
This bothers me so bad because I literally feel like you're talking about me. If the exact same thing happened to me the exact same way, They said the same exact things to me. Told me I was prideful, that I wasn't really a Christian, all of that. And like you said, it's a process. It is.
I was pretty much convinced to like get rid of those thoughts because they weren't right. And so I was like, it's hard to bring it up because it's like something that I just kind of like swept under the mental rug. And it was something that I kind of forced myself not to remember. But of course I remembered it. You know, like I will never forget being sitting in that restaurant and having 3 girls go off. And I mean, like strong attitudes, you know what I mean? Like the black girl hands and everything. Like, you are not you are not a Christian, so stop. So,
wow. Yeah. It's sad because they do paint this picture for you, like whatever you did in your other church, whatever you went through, whatever you believed in and practiced, that doesn't matter. Right. It's not even valid because it wasn't in the ICOC. You didn't study with the ICOC. And this is what I was told also. And this is the issue with people studying the Bible with the ICOC and with the ICC, is that they do this because this is how they get into your head, and this is how they start the whole brainwashing process, and you become indoctrinated. And then people start to feel like they're stuck, like people get stuck, and some people like us get out, and then there's so many people who they are just in it for so long they never get out.
Right.
After all of that was said, how did you feel?
So the other day, I actually looked in my trunk and I found my old, journal that I had bought, that I had all my studies recorded in, because, you know, I don't know if they did that with you either, but they didn't let me take my own notes. Like they had someone else take my notes. And so,
they did do that with me too. Yeah.
So I was like looking through it, and I can't remember the date, but I kind of found a place where I kind of pushed where I was able to start taking my own notes. And so I know it had to have been around that point, but I do know that mentally I was confused. Like I went home and questioned pretty much like, what have I been doing my whole life? I questioned everything. I questioned my family. I questioned my upbringing. I questioned my home church. I questioned the Baptist church, because that's the church that I grew up in. I questioned, and because, you know, hello, everybody takes history classes in high school and stuff. So because of that, I also questioned the Protestant Reformation. I questioned Catholicism. I questioned Christianity as a whole. I questioned it all. And I was just like, what is this? Like, what is this? So little did they know they were actually planting seeds of doubt a little bit. But at that point in my life, again, I was so depressed, and I really wanted something to help me feel whole without it being, you know, another relationship or something that wouldn't be long lasting. So at that time, I went with what I knew, which was I went to faith and prayer and all of that. And so I just tried to fight through it. But I know that I stopped my studies for a little while after that. And we were nearing the point where they were asking me if I wanted to be baptized. And initially I had already said, pretty much from the second study, which was, I think, the cross study, pretty much from the second study, I had already said that I wanted to be baptized without any of their suggesting at all. I knew that it was something I felt like I wanted to do. But at that point I was questioning if it was even worth it. And I continued coming to the church because I like the fellowship and I like the worship music, but I just began questioning pretty much questioning it at all. And I just I'm very introverted. So I like wanted to take a break and just kind of take a moment to think everything through. But of course I didn't let that happen.
So your idea of taking a break would be what? Would it be taking a few Sundays off or visiting a new church? What was it that you wanted to do but chose not to do?
I wanted to just continue coming to the church without the commitment to the studies. And yeah, without the commitment to the studies and without the commitment to actually getting baptized. Like, that's what I wanted. I wanted to keep fellowshipping, but without commitment, without feeling like I have to be here every Sunday, or, I have to get baptized in order to be a part or whatever. Like, I didn't want anything to do with that. I just wanted to frequent somewhere, get fed the word and go home and go about my day. That's what I wanted. And I didn't want to study anymore.
And what stopped you from doing that thing that you wanted to do?
I did it for a little while. I kind of played around a little bit, and I was just like, I'll let you guys know. I'll let you know. But ultimately, I was like, at the end of service, everybody's like fellowshipping and stuff, and so people would come up, hey, how are your studies going? And me being me, I'm like, they're not. And they would say, what do you mean? And I'm like, I'm at a place now where there's really nothing else I can study. And I have to decide if I want to be baptized, and I'm just not ready yet. And and then they would pull out some scriptures and like, we need to talk, or what's your number? Let's hang out. Let's go here. Let's go there. So at that point I was starting to meet like different sisters and go into like different coffee shops and restaurants and stuff around town to hang out or to spend time or whatever you want to call it, just so that they could encourage me to pursue baptism and why I should and all of that. So
what was that like, those hangouts?
Here's the thing. I'm a highly sensitive person, so I can read people like a book. So because I knew that they were coming into the conversation or into the hangout with intentions of convincing me, I would do everything in my power to keep them away from that topic. So even if it meant that I had to ask them about their day and what's going on with them, and trying to find ways to, I guess, encourage them, like I would do that to keep the spotlight off of me and what I'm doing, because what I wanted was companionship, because again, I'm in a new city. I do have a roommate and stuff, but she does her own thing, I'm doing my own thing. And at that time, like I said, I was just going through a lot, like depression wise and stuff, and so I was lonely and I wanted friends, and so I just wanted to hang out.
That's funny, because I remember I used to try to do the same thing. I used to try to take the focus off of me and just not always talk about God and church and all of that. Studying the Bible was always mentioned, or anything church or Christian related. If I ever tried to say anything that would be, I hate this word, encouraging to the person, so that it wasn't always about let's try to fix Tina, then I felt like my advice was never taken, because I was always the one who needed help spiritually. I actually had one person say to my face, she was like, oh, I don't take advice from struggling disciples.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, to my face, very bold. I was like, wow, okay. Like, that was really disrespectful, but it made me feel really bad. And at that time, I was just so focused on trying to be this great disciple that I didn't say anything. If it was today, I would have definitely said something.
Right.
I hated the whole hangout thing, because like you said, it was usually an agenda. It wasn't anything sincere. It was rare that you would hang out with someone and it was because they just wanted to hang out.
Right.
How about dating? Did you date in the church?
Okay. So I entered the church as a single. So I started in the singles ministry. A lot of the people who were in the singles ministry either were once in campus or like myself joined as a single, or they may have been divorced or maybe a widow or widower or whatever. But being a single and being a young single, because I had just graduated from college, it was interesting because they would sometimes try to mix me with some of the campus people because some of them were closer to my age. So it was kind of hard because at that time, the singles ministry was older than me. And so, but as far as dating goes, I mean, you know, there's this thing with singles, you've heard of it, encouragement dating. So that's where single brothers are not commanded, but not even required because it didn't happen often, but they are, I hate the word, encouraged to take single sisters out to, I guess, reduce the struggle. So my first date would have been about a week or so out of the water for me. It was a couple weeks after I had been baptized. And again, I'm going through things. I'm trying to sort through things in my life. And I'm on like a high because it's like, oh, yay, I'm baptized. My life is changing. But then I'm also nearing that point where it's like, things have not changed and I'm going to need more help than just a dip in the water. And so, so I'm struggling like within, like with myself, just not even, anything church related. And this brother asked me out. I did not want to go on the date at all. I did not want to go. I repeat, I did not want to go on the date. And the sister who had pretty much led my studies throughout and was now my discipler, she told me, she like put him on hold and was like, you need to go out on this date because, and she listed out the reasons why I need to go on the date. One, it would be encouraging for him. Two, this might be God answering my prayers and giving me my husband, so that I won't struggle with sexual immorality anymore. She also said, she said a bunch of crap, but all I know is I unwillingly went out on this date. And I was like, I don't even know what to do. I don't know what's to be expected. And the crazy thing is that I actually low-key had a crush on this guy. But, I did not want that to be known because I'm like, am I supposed to say anything? Like, how does this work? I don't want to get in trouble. Whatever. Because I do know that they don't want us like seriously dating less than like, you need to be a disciple for at least a year before you start seriously dating. Like that was an understanding in the church that I was in. And so,
I never knew that. You have to be a disciple for 1 year before you can seriously date.
That was an understanding. Now, that wasn't necessarily a rule, but it was just an understanding that they wanted you to be pretty much spiritually solid before you started dating. There were a few people who met the exception, but for the most part, everybody was kind of held to that. It was like a hidden rule, kind of, sort of. So, yeah. But I went out on a date with this guy. It was a double date. And, I mean, it was cool. Like I said, I liked him anyway. We already were building a friendship long before, while I was studying and stuff. So, I mean, it was okay, but I don't know. It was just awkward because it's like, what do you do? What do you talk about? Do I talk about Jesus the whole time? If I find out that I am interested in him, like, can we hug? I know we couldn't be like alone together, but then he ended up taking, like, the date started off as a double date and then it trickled down to just me and him because it was like 2 or 3 parts to the date. And when it was just he and I mean, I felt more comfortable talking to him, but I do know that he went back and reported to my discipler that I didn't need to go out on a date for a while. And I don't know, I don't know what impression he got, but he made it clear to her that I didn't need to go out on another date for a while. So, Yeah.
That's strange. So he suggested that you don't date for a while. Do you know why?
I
Or
mean,
what he said?
I'm not sure exactly what he said. And my discipler and the guy were actually really good friends. So, I mean, they have their own like share of secrets and stuff. So I really don't fully know what his rationale was. But I guess maybe he felt like, spiritually I was too immature, or maybe I just had so much going on, but beyond spirituality, that I needed to work those things out before I connected with somebody else. That's the impression I got, because the guy is a really genuine guy. He's, like, to this day, I mean, he's somebody who I would trust to talk. I don't talk to him, but if I knew I needed to talk to somebody, he would be he would be a person that I would consider, you know what I mean, if I were still talking to somebody from the ICOC, simply because he's that type of understanding person. But so yeah, I don't know. I don't fully know, but I do know that that was the message that she had gotten, because I mean, there were a few brothers who I know, I heard them kind of mention that they wanted to hang out with me or to take me out and stuff, but they didn't get around to doing it for whatever reason. And I do know that leadership sometimes will, whether it's like regional leadership or even like family groups and stuff, if they are aware of where you stand spiritually, like, they'll say, yeah, you should take her out, or I wouldn't do that right now. I was actually in the purity program at that point, which that's a whole other story. But at that point,
you were in the purity group?
Yeah.
Oh, I was in that too.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, so go ahead.
Yeah, I was in the purity group, so and actually so was he. And so we were both advised to just kind of stay away, because we were both in phase 1. And so they wanted us to both at least be in phase 2, if not phase 3, before we tried anything. But then I later moved, and I think he developed an interest in another sister.
Oh, all right. So if you don't mind me asking, why were you a part of the purity group?
Okay. So I actually became a part of the ICOC in 2012, and in 2013, I linked up with someone from my past, and at first it was just really platonic, and then one thing led to another, and we did have sex. And so it happened a couple of times, well, 3 times, and I felt guilty about it, so I confessed it. And when I confessed it to my first, I confessed it to my family group leader, and she told me that I had a lack of faith. That the whole reason why all that happened was because I'm deceptive, I'm a liar, and that if I had been honest about what I was doing or who I was hanging out with from the beginning, that it never would have happened. And that, because like we would meet up at like Starbucks or something like that. And she was like, well, did you tell anybody that you were meeting up with him at Starbucks? And I was like, no. Like, I didn't know that I had to ask for permission. And she's like, it's not asking for permission, it's simply being held accountable, because you're putting yourself in a bad place. You need to set yourself up to win, and you set yourself up to fail. That's a lack of faith. So she went off of me. And then by that point I had a different discipler, and she was kind of hurt because she just felt like I lied to her. So her feelings were hurt. She didn't talk to me for a little while. And then I was encouraged to go talk to the lead evangelist's wife. And she surprisingly, she was the person who I was the most scared to talk to, because I mean, she's the lead evangelist's wife, right? But in actuality, she was actually the most compassionate, most gracious person that I talked to. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that she comes from a similar background, where she joined in the singles, and she went through similar things and was immoral as a disciple as well. So she got it. She understood it. She understood where I came from. And she gave me lots of tools to use to help. But everybody else, especially the people who came up in campus, which was most of the leaders, they were very standoffish, and I felt very isolated. And it was one Sunday after church, my family group leader literally grabbed me by the arm, dragged me like a little kid over to the lady who leads the purity ministry and said, she needs to talk to you. And she walked away. And that's how I started with purity ministry. So,
how was that purity group that you were a part of? Was it a meeting that you had to go to once a week?
Yeah. It was strange AF. I liked it and I hated it at the same time. I liked it because, of the security of being able to talk about everything, knowing that I'm not the only person out here struggling. And I actually developed some close relationships with a lot of girls from that group. So that part I liked. The part that I hated about it was the fact that, me having desires because I'm 20, I'm in my 20s or whatever, and I have sexual urges, like that's treated as an addiction. I was like, how is that a sexual addiction? Like that's pretty much how they regarded purity group was you have some form of sexual addiction, whether that's to fantasy or masturbation or pornography or emotional promiscuity, which what the hell is that? Or whatever, or immorality or same-sex attraction. I mean, they had a whole mountain of lists of like what category you would fall up under, and several of us belonged to different ones, and so it was kind of like, well, find your label and that's where you're going to stay up under, and that's what we're going to work on. But I honestly did not feel like that group was for me. Not that I didn't find it beneficial, because it definitely helped me with some tools, but honestly I just felt like we just exposed ourselves, and it was like a second round of D time, honestly. And yeah, so the ministry, the purity ministry was just, it was kind of weird. Yeah, I don't know.
I had a similar experience too, and I had to meet with a group of women who all were in this purity group for something, and I felt in the beginning like it was stupid because I mean, some of the things that some of the women complained about, what they were there for, to me in my mind, I was like, that's normal. Like there was this one woman in the group, and her so-called issue was that she was single, she was a widow, and her issue was that occasionally she would think about sex, or she would look at another man with lust. And I could never understand that, because I'm like, well, unless you're gay, which she's not, she's straight, you're gonna look at another man with lust if he's attractive. I mean, I never could understand how I was supposed to shut that part of me off, because it's so natural and it's such an instinct that we can't control. And I thought at first the purity group was meant for people who had issues with porn, watching porn, or masturbating, or same-sex attraction. But there were people in there complaining and crying that they had a dream that they were having sex. And I'm just like, you gotta be fixed for this? Like, this is, first of all, you're single. If I was single, I'm pretty sure I'll be dreaming about that too, especially if you experienced it already. We're human, and this is what we do. This is how we were made to be. So I ended up liking it mainly because of the small community of women and how close we became. But at the same time, I felt like there was always a group for something. I was always invited to be a part of something. It was just any way to fix me, even if it was something minor that I felt like, oh, I could just pray about this and it should go away. It's not a big deal. It's not taking over my life. But it was always something that someone was telling me, no, you need to join this group. You need to join that group. So it was so many groups. It was pretty frustrating.
Right. And I mean, I even went to like there's like a national purity conference that's held like once a year. And I mean, I attended one or two of them. And I mean, just being with different brothers and sisters from different fellowships, whether it's like we have the meeting, this particular meeting was in Chicago. And so there were lots of people who were from Chicago or from areas around Chicago, as well as from like New York and from West Coast and all of that. But I mean, they were a lot more, the women that I met then were a lot more gracious and understanding than a lot of the women that were actually in the church that I was in at the time. And that's crazy considering the fact that the church that I was in was or is considered to be one of the healthiest churches in the cooperation. So it's like, I don't know. This is such a lack of grace.
Right. I think that my main issue, I feel like I look at it like this, like, all right, if you want to have a church that has all these different ministries and groups and help for people to recover from things, then fine. But it should be a choice. It should be your own personal decision on whether or not you even want to join a group, if you feel like you even need it. Because if you don't see that there's a problem, then how can it be fixed? You're going to just be a part of a group and you're just going to be there just to shut people up, which is what I did most of the time, you know. But my issue with this church, with the ICOC, is that when I was, from my personal experience when I was in there, they didn't give me the option. They would every Sunday see me and reminds me, look, you know, we're going to start the group next week. Come on, I really feel you should join. You really should join. You really should join. That's the issue, because people could easily come on here, listen to your experience and say, well, she was living in sexual sin, so what's wrong with that? She does need to be a part of a group. Okay, but it should be your personal choice. That should be something you decide. You shouldn't feel guilty or feel like, oh, I have to do this because I have to be fixed. I have to get baptized because I have to be fixed. It should not be that way. And that's what I find is the issue, which is why I say that it is a cult, because that's what cults do. And very extremely controlling. It's all about control. It's not about allowing the individual to learn for themselves or to figure things out on their own. It's about 100% control. And then they use these trigger words that we now hate, like, oh, well, we have to encourage you, or, oh, you have to seek advice, and you have to stop being prideful. You're being too prideful because how dare you think that you're a Christian just because you've been a part of a Baptist church your whole life. You're being prideful. They use these trigger words and it stays, and it really sticks with the person.
Yeah. And it's funny because like in the meantime, like when all of this is happening, so like so far, like what you and I have talked about is pretty much from, you know, from when I started attending the church to my baptism, like a few months later, to like pretty much a year later, after beginning to study. During all of this time, I actually started going to therapy, and I found this therapist. She's actually a Christian therapist, and funny thing is that I learned about her through another sister who had learned about her from another sister. There was several sisters who was going to the same therapist, and I had other sisters asking me, well, are you sure she's a Christian therapist? Because, well, no, the first question was, is she a part of our church? No. Well, do you think that's Christian therapy? Are you sure about that? Get out my face. Like, yes, it is Christian therapy. But I say that to say, like, you know, as she was counseling me through this process, like she knew more about me being immoral as a Christian, because I hate saying disciple. I have issues with that, but she knew about me being immoral as a Christian before I even confessed it to the family group leader and all of that. And so with that, I mean, you know, did she correct me? Yes. But did she tell me I had a lack of faith? Absolutely not. Because, with her training, she went back to, okay, well, this is the theory of Maslow, and our basic needs are food, water, shelter, sex, and there's something else too. But, she's like, these are basic needs. And if those needs aren't fulfilled, then you're not going to be able to make it up to the next level. In the peer, it's like a structure or whatever. You can Google it. But I understood what she was saying because I've taken plenty of psychology classes. And so, yeah. But I felt like the ICOC ignored basic needs. And instead of teaching and coaching you on how to really equip yourself with what you need to get through those things, you were just shunned and you were shamed or filled with even more shame because, I had an urge, or, I masturbated last night, or, I did this or that. And they use that in their tactics when they're studying with you, but then they also continue using those tactics, those scare tactics, the intimidation tactics, because that's really what it is. It's intimidation. They intimidate you with the Bible by saying you're going to hell because you have committed the sin and you haven't fully repented in your heart, even if you may be working it out with God yourself. That's why I always say, for every time somebody has told me that I have a lack of faith, I wish that I would have told them, well, you have a lack of grace, because, that to me is desperately missing in the church or in many people that are in leadership in that church. And so my therapist actually told me on several occasions, one session one time was spent on our phones looking up ICOC cult or anything related to it. I mean, we were watching videos, we were looking at different websites, and I mean, she told me straight up, she's like, you need to get out of there because you have something different in you that everyone else doesn't. Everyone else is so, I guess whipped or they're so, I guess, connected that they can't break apart from the church. But she's like, you haven't been a part of it that long. You can get out now. It's okay. She's like, you can even come to my church. It's fine. Just do what you need to do and leave. And so, I mean, I kept that in mind, and she kept, she didn't really press me about it. She just told me I needed to think about it, pray about it. And I mean, when I finally left the church, I mean, her voice was in the back of my mind because everything that had happened within that first year happened again towards the end of it all. And I was just like, okay, there will be no third time. I am leaving this time. And it just is what it is. But I do know that what kept me there was the fact that, again, I'm in a new city and I have these new friends that I'm always busy with. That's another thing about being in the singles ministry, is they keep you busy. And so, I mean, I'm always doing something. I'm always out with my friends, quote unquote. And so I felt like I couldn't leave my friends. So that was the ultimate reason why I chose to stay in the ICOC. And I begrudgingly went to purity group every week, even though I didn't want to.
When you left, well, first of all, let me first say, your therapist, I love her already, because that is so on point. The fact that she went online and Googled all this information, because a lot of people are afraid to look up information. They say, no, I refuse. They're a part of a church, but they don't want to look up information, but they don't realize that the fact that they have fear of looking up information about the church being a cult, that alone is a sign that you're in a cult. Because if you're so confident where you are and if everything is so great, then why not look up info? But then you also have those people that will look up information or look up YouTube videos, because they do it to me all the time. And then they will defend their church and they'll take it personal and become very offended, yet they have all these people who are saying the same thing, stating the same claims, having very similar experiences. But for some reason, people are so brainwashed in this church that they don't see that there's something wrong with where they are. Because if more than one person is sharing the same experience and it's a negative experience from the same church and you're the only one who doesn't see it, then it's not them going crazy.
Right.
So it's good that she actually looked up this information with you and was like, look, you need to get out, and that she was there to be supportive. When you left, those friends that you stuck around with, because I can understand that I was afraid to leave because I was afraid that my friendships will end too. Did those friendships last? How did your friends react when you decided to leave?
I say that the way I left is that I ghosted. In other words, I literally just disappeared. I stopped responding to text messages. I did not answer phone calls. I blocked numbers on my phone. I didn't answer emails. We have like group me chats with like our family groups and stuff. Like I ended those. I deleted a lot of them, like on Instagram. Like my Facebook was already gone, but my Instagram, I stopped them from following me. And I mean, I continued following them, but they just didn't follow me anymore. Because I went in and deleted all of them. So I just ghosted. Like I just kind of disappeared. And when I think people started realizing that I wasn't coming around, there were a few that, were like, hey, I haven't really seen you in a while. And I started getting more and more comfortable with, yeah, I'm looking for a new church, or I just need a break, or I'm busy or something. So that, like, I left, I think in December of 2017, and so, or maybe November, whatever. But I just ghosted. So honestly, I truly don't know what they thought. There were a few that I did disclose that information to, and their response was, fine. Well, one in particular, her response was, find the church that fits you, that suits you. And I think she kind of went along with that because I've been in more than one church. I've been in two churches because I moved at a certain point. And so she and I both were in both churches around the same time. And so the second church is a lot different, smaller and stuff. So because it was so different, she kind of understood. I think she understood why I was just like, because she had gotten to the point where she was starting to commute back to our first church because she preferred that one over the newer one. So, yeah. But I will say that, like, my best friend, the one that I actually came in with, so to speak, she and I are still close. She is in my wedding. I was very shocked that she agreed to be in my wedding because I was ready for rejection. And she's been like super, super duper supportive. She's asked me a few times, like, how do you feel about this person not being in your life anymore, or that person? Like, these are just mutual friends that we have from our church, from our first church, I guess. But I don't know. I just never really speak on it. I just keep it moving. And yeah, there's another girl who I just recently started back talking to. She actually just sent me a gift from our registry, on our wedding registry. So that was shocking. But she's talking to me a bit more. So, like, just through social media and stuff. So yeah, there's actually two who are still talking to me through social media, and everybody else, I think they're trying to add me on social media just to see what's going on, because I think it's finally gotten around that, hey, Tia has left and she's like getting married now and all that. So yeah,
That's good that whoever was actually worth keeping around stuck around. That's how I see it. I feel like whoever is a real true friend is worth keeping. They're the ones who are going to stick around. And then the others who are not worth being in company with are the ones who are going to just kind of shun you and turn their back. So even if it's that one good person, then they're worth it. So that's really good. How did you handle the effects of the doctrination How did you handle it when you left?
I was anxious as hell. For the first, those weeks in the moment felt like they were crawling by, but I look back now, those weeks actually flew. But in the moment, the first few weeks, honestly, I don't think I stopped being anxious until maybe the start of the new year, if that. I was anxious. Like, I was just wondering when the next second would be my last. I was like, is Jesus coming? Is he coming now? Is he like, I was just scared. I was walking around scared. I was walking around on eggshells, not certain of who I was going to run into in public, ICOC member wise, and not certain about what God thought of me. And so I knew then at that point, when I started to realize that my mindset had totally shifted, and that I needed to figure out grace and have grace for myself at least, and hopefully come to a point where I understand that God has grace as well. But most importantly for me was to find grace in that moment for myself. That was, once I figured out how to do that, I think I went back into the scriptures and I started to reteach myself, not what I had been taught by the ICOC, but trying to undo some of their doing. And that's been a process. It's still a process. Definitely still a process. So yeah, that was the main thing, was that I was very anxious, and I just knew that I just felt like I was gonna die. I was like, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna go to hell. That's it. And that's not a fun way to live. Like, not knowing when just having that feeling of I'm going to die now, or I'm already dead. Like, and I'm like questioning myself, like, okay, well, I know that sin leads to death, sin study. Sin leads to death. Oh my God, is this what death feels like? Like, I'm, panicking. Like, I have an Apple Watch, and I'm looking at my watch, and I'm looking at my heart rate, and I'm viewing it from November, when I was still in the church, to December, where I decided to ghost. And I've noticed that there's a strong increase in my heart rate, just resting heart rate. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm anxious. So I had to tell my doctor, and I had to get on anxiety meds.
Wow. So you had to take anxiety medication when you left because you were so afraid that you were going to die and go to hell?
Yeah. I'm on anxiety meds right now. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So you're still taking the medication.
Mm-hmm.
So you're still dealing with anxiety because of your experience, or is it just you're dealing with other things and that's why you're still on the meds?
I'm definitely still dealing with other things. Initially, it was solely for, like, I guess I felt so wired that I needed meds to unwire me enough so that I could deal with my other crap that's on my plate, So that's how I approached it, was like, this is going to help with the ICOC BS so that I can deal with other stuff. That's actually important. So, yeah. But I'm continuing on the meds, just in, like, my doctor is aware, and she understands why I'm on the meds, but I haven't yet started a talk therapy or anything like that, like restarted a talk therapy, so that I can, like, work on a program, I guess, to kind of gradually bump myself down, or wean myself off of them, because, you can't just jump off of anti-anxiety meds or antidepressant meds like that, because it will mess with your chemical balance or chemical imbalances or whatever. So yeah, but I'm on meds to handle all of the things, but I'm no longer anxious about ICOC necessarily, although I do get a little concerned about who I'm going to run into and stuff. But I think now, honestly, since the wedding is, I guess the real reason was that I felt like they're going to find me and they're going to tell me that I lack faith and that I need to break up with my fiance. And I don't know. I just felt like they were just going to do everything in their power to destroy my relationship, because he isn't in the ICOC. And so I was just like, no. So yeah, in a very convoluted way, I am still taking my meds, but it's not to deal with them anymore.
Okay, so that's good. So at least you've learned how to cope with the effects of the brainwashing and just all the crap that cults put you through.
Yeah.
At least you've learned how to, because I can only imagine that stress on top of regular life stress, like your everyday life stress. That's a lot. That's a lot to handle. And when I was a member, I went on anxiety medication too. And I stayed on it for 6 months only because I didn't want to get so used to it to where I wouldn't know how to cope without using the medication. Right. I really did not want to be on meds, but it got so out of hand. I just had to. It was affecting my work life, school, everything. It got really, really, really bad. And I actually felt the same way. I remember one day, I think I mentioned this in like one of my older videos. I was sitting on the steps in my house, and I was just having a whole freak out panic attack. I was crying, and I just kept thinking, what if I die and go to hell? I feel like I'm going to die. I feel like I'm not going to live my life full out. I'm not going to get to do the things I want to do because I'm going to die. What if I go to hell because I'm having impure thoughts, or because I'm questioning the church itself? I felt very skeptical about it, even though I was a member for about 2 years at that time. I was a member, and it was really bad. And I remember calling my discipling partner, and she said, well, you must not be praying enough, and you need to stop worrying, because worry is not of God. And if you're worrying, that means you're not praying enough. That means you're doing something wrong. And she just freaked me out more. She didn't help me at all. I was like, okay. And at that moment, I even thought to myself, is really messed up thought, but I thought to myself, if I wasn't a mother, I'll probably try to commit suicide.
Yeah.
It was really bad. It gets scary with the things that they tell you. And some people think it's an exaggeration, but it's not. Not everyone has the worst experience, but majority of people like me and you and so many other people I've spoken to have dealt with the anxiety and depression, and it really affects your mental health, especially if you're prone to have a decline in your mental health. Like me, I've dealt with anxiety since I was 12. Mm-hmm. So for me, I have to be very careful, because it's easy for me to sink into that.
Yeah.
And being a part of the ICOC definitely made it so much worse for me. So I'm glad that you were able to get off your meds and that you've been able to cope. Are you in a new church now?
My fiance and I have been visiting around different churches in the area. I am not pressed at all to commit to a church right now. Like I'm just not. I told him, I was like, I feel like I just got out of a 5-year relationship. I need some time. But I wouldn't mind, visiting different places and just seeing what else is out there. But I no longer feel like I have to be, I guess, one in the number or a part of the body on a Sunday. I don't feel that guilt about not being in church every single Sunday. So it's been cool. Honestly, my job helped out with that, because most times I was working, or I am working on Sundays. So it's like, oh, I got to go to work. But no, I'm not in a church right now. I do visit. And one of the churches that I visited is actually a Baptist church. And it's kind of like a challenge for me to actually sit through the services and do my best to not try to analyze what's going on, or try to tear it apart in an ICOC judgmental, critical type manner. So I feel like the more I visit that church, the more I'll get to a point where I'm no longer sitting there trying to say, well, this person's not really saved, or that trying to, I guess, take the ICOC doctrine and apply it and, shun those people or whatever with my mind. So.
Right. I understand how that is. It does take some time to get that out because it's almost like learned behavior. It just becomes habit, and you start to look at the world through the lens of the ICOC.
Yeah.
And every now and then it's like in the back of your mind, you're not a member anymore. You know that you realize that their doctrine is wrong. The way that they're using scriptures is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But it still is something that's so ingrained in you, and it takes time for that to be released and to get it out your system so that you're not looking through the lens of the ICOC. Now you're looking through your own lens, and you're not thinking like, oh, well, this person might not go to heaven because they're not a part of the church, or that person just cursed, they're living in sin, so now they have to repent, or if they get hit by a car, they're going to go to hell, even though they were baptized 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Those were the things that I had to deal with. Every little thought I had to be careful with, and it takes time, but eventually it goes away. Eventually those thoughts go away. So I guess it's safe to assume that you still have a relationship with God the same way that you did before.
Sure. I think the way that I did before was just that God is the supreme ruler, and I must not do anything that goes against his word, or else I will be damned. And I think now I'm just trying my best to learn what grace is. So I think that my view or my understanding of God is a lot different, understanding that he is sovereign, but also understanding that he is gracious. And that's been like my thing, to just try to get through that, is to just fully understand what God's grace is, and what that means, and what that looks like for me, and how am I going to conduct myself in that.
I'm glad that you didn't allow this church to make you sway in your beliefs. I tell people all the time that you should follow the path that you feel closely led to follow. And when I say led, I don't necessarily mean led as in by the Holy Spirit or God, just because I myself no longer am a believer, but I can understand and respect others who are. And I feel that we all have that voice and that feeling and that intuition and instinct, or whatever you want to call it. And the problem is that a lot of people leave a cult and they're like, that's it, I'm an atheist, or I don't want to listen or believe in God anymore, read the Bible. And that's the wrong way to go, because then you're going off of emotion. For me, I left religion and I left Christianity, not because of the ICOC, but because of my own skepticism, which is why I'm no longer a believer. But the fact that you are still a believer and you still consider yourself a Christian, am I correct? You still consider yourself a Christian?
Yeah.
That's important, because you're not allowing the ICOC to be the reason why you're a Christian, and you're not allowing the ICOC to be the reason why you're not a Christian.
Yeah.
It's your own personal choice and your own personal belief. Just like they always say, it's your personal walk with God. That's your personal walk, and it's your personal choice, and that's what's important. So I'm really happy that you didn't allow them to, not allow, I mean, no one really allows it, but right. It didn't get to that point. You stood your grounds, and you've been staying strong. So what kind of advice could you give for people who are a part of this church, or maybe someone who's listening who's thinking about joining and doing studies? What kind of advice could you give them?
Sheesh, there's a lot. Okay, so foremost, I mean, I will put it this way. My experience in the ICOC was not all bad, but the things that were bad enough for me to consider leaving and then ultimately leave. So I would definitely say pay attention to red flags. Read people like a book, and don't be afraid to speak up and call them out, because I think sometimes they are so accustomed to speaking their own language. And it's crazy. Like, you and I have never met each other in person. We are clearly from two different parts of the country, but we have a mutual language in, discipleship and fellowship and encouragement and all that other mess. But I say that to say, because everybody is so stuck on speaking the same language, and looking up to certain ones that they feel are spiritual or whatever, or more honorable than others, that a lot of times those people go unchecked, and they're not as humble as they say that they are. And not saying go in there like, oh, with like a pompous attitude or anything like that, but just being real and keeping it real with people, because I definitely think that a lot of people, at least where I was, they need like a dose of reality. So that's one thing. Just keep your eyes open and don't be afraid to be real with people. Another thing I would say is be careful who you talk to.
Definitely.
I know people who are in leadership that have done more dirt than I have, who have been, if I want to compare, who have been more immoral than I was. But they're in leadership because they know how to answer questions, and they know who to remain connected to in order to make themselves appear spiritual. And therefore they're in leadership. But if you're just like, blunt and out there with everything that's going on with you, which is pretty much what they want you to do, then that's how you get labeled as a struggling Christian and other things. So just be careful about who you talk to, because you don't want to be talking to somebody who is not gracious, who isn't actually in their word all the time and doesn't understand the Bible for themselves, but only go by what they were taught. Because you're going to want to talk to somebody who is gracious, who can help equip you with tools to help you get through tough times, or hell, even good times. So that's another thing. Just be careful about who you talk to, because you want to be able to be yourself without being labeled, or without being told you can't date, or whatever else. And another word of advice would be they use that scripture, I don't know where it is, but about, searching the word daily, like the Bereans. Take that and actually make that your thing, and when somebody who is in leadership, or who's leading a Bible talk or a D group or whatever, if they are reading a scripture, take time to actually look through that scripture and analyze it yourself and read multiple versions of it, and really see if what they're saying is a part of the indoctrination, or if it's actually inspired from God. Because if all word is supposed to be living and active and inspired by God, but it just sounds like a bunch of ICOC mess, which is controlling and trying to make everybody the same person or have the same walk, when technically we're supposed to have different walks, then 9 times out of 10, they're not approaching sharing the word with good intentions. So yeah, that would be my advice.
That is perfect advice. I'm so happy that you decided to share your experience, because this is something that a lot of people do deal with, but they don't always want to talk about it. So
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us, Tia.
No problem.
And guys, if any of you want to share your story, don't be shy. This is a perfect platform you do it. Just go down below in the description box. I have my social media accounts that you can follow me on. Send me an inbox, DM me, shoot me an email, hbhl@yahoo.com. That's also down below. Also, I have my website down below in the description box. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for joining. Again, Tia, thank you. I'm pretty positive that there are going to be people out there who are going to hear this, and they're going to hear your story, and they're going to hear your wonderful advice, which is 1,000,000% accurate and true advice. I couldn't have said it any better.
No problem.
All right, guys, enjoy your day, and I'll see you in the next video.